Hi, everybody. It's kind of weird I can't see you. We've all heard that before today. It's fine. Okay, so I have been teaching driver ed for, I don't even know how long, which is bad. I should probably know, probably between 6 and 10 years. And I was the squeaky wheel that complained about some stuff. So I got asked to start creating some courses, and Audra has had me stick on to continue to teach and develop courses as she has taken over as our new coordinator over the last, what has it been, a couple of years now. And this particular presentation is about driver road testing ethics and about how to use DEMS. Now, I'm going to go, hey, Brandon, nice to see you too. I'm going to go relatively quickly through the DEMS training. And I know some of you are like, cool, I already know it. And others will be a little bit lost. I am in the process of creating a lucid chart that I will share with Audra along with some other materials. And then Audra can send that out to you all through whatever method she's going to share with us all of the things the presenters have said they'll share with us. So, okay, welcome back, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen and just go ahead and start my presentation. The examiner training driver education management system. So that's what we're going to work on today. Oh, wrong button. And there you go. Sorry. Interrater reliability. Use the chat feature for me and tell me what you know about interrater reliability. You ever heard the phrase before? Jeremy, not much, nothing, zero, nothing. Okay. So that is what I expected, interestingly enough. If you've ever assessed an AP test, you probably have had some interrater reliability training. The purpose of interrater reliability is raters will get together, or scorers or teachers who are going to score a test will get together and they will practice with a particular test so that everybody who assesses that test scores students in the same way. Now, rubrics help with that, but also practicing with other instructors scoring the same assessment helps as well. So for example, during the regular school day, I teach American Sign Language, and me and my other ASL teachers get together and we watch student examples of particular assignments. And we use our rubric and we score it. And then we pause the student video and we talk about why we gave them the scores we did. And if anybody has a score that doesn't match the rest of the group, we talk about why. And we try and get so that the next student we are going to score, and we try and get so that we give them the exact same score across all of our raters so that we understand the rubric the same way. Now, we've already answered what it is, but why is that kind of thing important? You can again use the chat feature. Austin, yeah, AP. To be fair, good job, Tracy, yep. Equality. Consistency, good. Repeatable, Matt, that's very important. You're absolutely right. It's important that we're repeatable. And Kevin, yeah, that the scores mean the same thing, because a student who takes a road test from me at Lone Peak High School should get the same kind of test and the same kind of score as a teacher who takes it from Brandon Ripplinger or from Esther Duncan, or, you know, whether we're urban or rural, whether we're a new teacher or a seasoned veteran, the student should be able to have an unbiased test. Good job, Darlene and Ryan. You might have heard this yesterday, but we want to have as little bias as possible in our testing. And that's true not only a negative bias, which we hear all about all the time, but also a positive bias. We don't want to have a positive bias saying, oh, well, today this kid was just off his game a little bit. Normally he drives much better. Or, wow, that girl made a mistake that she had never made before. I'm just going to go ahead and pass her through this road test. No, no, no. Once we're examining the student, once we are giving them their road test, we have to change from a teacher who's concerned about them progressing and trying to help them to an assessor, just an evaluator who is saying, okay, you can do it or you cannot. It's not supposed to be emotional. It's not supposed to be biased either for or against the student. Okay, so we got to apply some test ethics here. Whenever possible, instructors should not drive their own students. Now, you heard this before in the law and policy class, so this shouldn't be brand new, although it is a little bit shocking, and I understand it probably is going to take some time to make this shift. But when you assess your own students that you have trained behind the wheel, you tend to have an implicit positive bias toward the student. You've built a relationship with them. You don't want to see them fail. You want them to do well. And you feel like if you fail them, there might be tears and then you'll have to deal with the tears. Well, yeah, but you're supposed to be an unbiased assessor, just checking that they can or can't do the skills. So whenever possible, you should not test your own students that you drove. Now that means that you can test other students in your school. There was some confusion about that yesterday. You can in fact drive and test other students who are at your school, but if I'm instructor A and this other guy's instructor B, when it comes to testing, we should swap our students. So they train with me and test with instructor B. It helps with all of those things we talked about with Interrater reliability. Please only allow students 2 attempts on any test. This is somewhat new when it comes to permit testing, but this is nothing new when we've talked about road testing. Road testing, they're only allowed 2 attempts at the public school. Matt Miller says, don't you test your students you've taught in every other class? Well, yeah, however, because testing our students is taking on the role of essentially a deputy in the Utah Highway Patrol's office, the driver license division is essentially deputizing us to give a test. If you're an AP teacher, you don't read the tests your students submitted. Even though you taught them, and even though we believe that teachers have a high ethical bar, you don't, on these big high stakes tests, we don't read and rate our own students' tests. I'm an ACT writing portion reader. I don't get to read anybody's tests who's from Lone Peak. So, Doug, you said, did you say we can offer 2 road tests? Yes. So if the student drives with you, trains with you, tests with somebody else and fails that test, they can be allowed to retake the test in the public school setting once. That's how money works, and Audra can maybe explain that a little bit better. But the state will pay for 1 road test and will reimburse for a second, but then they won't reimburse anymore. So we send them to the driver license division at that point. Okay, all the other questions look like, sorry, they've been answered. When you're giving a permit test, let's only give it to them twice. If they can't pass it after the first time, tell them to go home, give them a handbook, have a box of them in your classroom. If you offer the permit test, if you're asked to give the permit test, you are required to offer the permit test to your students. And then give them a handbook to go home and study, tell them to come back and they can retake the test, but we're only going to give them 2 shots. That's a new thing that we've implemented at USBE and Utah. If they can't pass it after the second attempt, we want them to go to driver license division because they might need more accommodations. And we are not allowed to accommodate these students at all. We are expected to give them a paper, not read it to them, not explain anything to them. Some of the tests have colored signs. It's important that if you are giving the test to a student, you look at it and make sure if it's got a sign with color on it and they've got to identify the color that you've printed it in color. Otherwise, it does make that question a little bit unfair. But if they need any kind of accommodation, they can go to the driver license division, and the driver license division has more flexibility with accommodations than we do. Hopefully that doesn't cause anybody extreme heartburn. Examiner's course, there's going to be a brand new examiner's course. It's going to be available soon, and Audra will send out a link to it. She showed us a little tiny video clip from it. It's not quite polished and finished yet, but it was a good introduction. And as I was watching that, I pulled up the workbook that I was given when I became an examiner and looked through it and was shocked at how bad that previous training had been because it had to be on paper. And we really do need to see things visually. Also, the old one was on the SDC, so all of that training was replaced by the DEMS, which we're going to talk about here shortly. But you know, we're kind of lucky since I started teaching driver ed until now technology has improved so much that we can have better visual training so that we can know what the heck's going on. It is separate and different from past DLD examiners training, and so everybody will take it again this year. And then right now we're required to take it once every 5 years for licensing. It's possible that that will change in the future. You will be able to take it more often. If you forget, you can go back to the videos and watch, okay, how does this thing in DEMS work? And you can watch that. Or if you've been out of the car for a couple of years and you want to be refreshed and remember how you're supposed to do a road test, that's an option too. It will be, oh, I already talked about that. Okay, best practices training for the test. Now, we're all trainers and we're all examiners, or we have the possibility to be, because our license allows us to do everything that a driver education instructor needs to do. Teach in the classroom, run a range, run a simulator, train a kid behind the wheel, do the observation with the kid, and do their road testing. We should, when we're in the car, be practicing for that test every single drive. You should train on every drill that they're going to need to test on every time you drive with them. Just driving around with an unplanned route and saying, oh, well, let's make a right turn, let's make a left turn, maybe let's do a U-turn, and then looking at your watch and saying, oh, it's time to switch drivers. That kid has not really gotten the in-depth training that they really need. Matt Miller, if written test is important as driving, shouldn't it be administered by another teacher, not classroom, to follow your philosophy to be unbiased? Yeah, it could be. At our school, I'm the only one who offers the permit test. One of the things that's a little bit different with the written test versus the road test is there is an answer key that someone else has created, and it's either right or it's wrong. And I guess that's the same with the road test, but you know, did that kid check over their shoulder good enough is kind of a question in the road test. Audra's right. A written test isn't going to kill you. The kid can pass the permit test with us and then they have another year out there to practice. But really, that test is a gate. And once the kid passes through the road test gate, they get to be out on the road all by themselves. So, for example, freeway driving is not part of Utah State's testing procedures. In order to change that, we'd have to go through a legislative process to change that. And we at our school feel like it's extremely important that a kid can get on and off the freeway before we let them pass their road test. So that's one of the things that we practice with them. Is it terrifying? Yes. And we happen to be close to the freeway, and so that works for us. Some of you are really far away from a freeway or another high-speed road that involves an on and off ramp. But, you know, we might die if we send a kid out to the road who's not prepared. Permit testing is a little bit different. Okay, so we're going to try and train on.
Allison, you have another question about a road test, second road test. It's usually pretty common practice for schools not to test. If someone flunks the road test, that they usually have someone else do the next test. That's pretty common practice for schools. And I would say that's a good practice. Because then you can have another, for one way, they can't argue with it if he comes up with the same results. And then also it's just good practice to make sure that the same person is scoring the same way as you are.
You're right. We have, at our school, we have multiple road instructors. And so when we have a student who fails the road test, we actually assign them to a new instructor, and they have to retrain with that instructor behind the wheel before they can test again. We don't just do a test and then send them to somebody else to test a second time. I would say the vast majority of our students who fail their first test, because they go out and retrain with another instructor, they're able to pass it the second time with our school. If they don't pass that second test at our school, it's because they didn't practice with their parent. They didn't get the 40 hours. I mean, I drove with a kid the other day who had literally an hour behind the wheel before they were behind the wheel with me. That was a little scary. So I really appreciate the Zero Fatalities presentation earlier that's going to help get parents more involved earlier on. We've also heard already today about increasing the complexity of traffic over time. We need to plan thoughtful routes, and we need to know that we can get all of our drills done on those routes, and we need to know those those routes well. It might be a good idea to throw a cone in the back of your car, because sometimes you have a place where you used to parallel park that worked fantastic, and then that car got sold or moved or towed, and now you can't practice behind it. For practicing and for testing, if you cannot find somewhere else to parallel park, you are allowed to set up a fake parallel park spot using trash cans or cones. You can do the same for hill parking if no hill is available nearby where your city is, which I know sounds strange, but there are some places where it's extremely flat. And these routes should be planned not just for testing, which is what we're talking about here, but also for training. The liability cover your assets presentation talked about have a route, have a plan, have it in your file. Say, this is where we went. This is what we did. That snail trail helps you a lot when it comes to somebody wanting to claim that you didn't train them well enough. And then give feedback to the student every drive, not just for their test. And I have created a template that you could use if you want to. You can change it, you can edit it, you can add to it, you can create your own. But you should give them feedback in writing after every test. Let them know what they need to go home and work on. Let the parent know what the child can do well and what they can't do well. And you should communicate that feedback to the student and to the parent so they can practice and be prepared for their next test. Okay, before we move on to DEMS, I'm going to open it up to any questions that you might have from me. I have not been monitoring the Q&A, but Audra does. So if you have questions there, hopefully she's answered them. If you have any questions about testing ethics or what we've talked about so far, feel free to leave a chat or a Q&A and I'll answer them. And then we'll move on to DEMS, which is the bulk of this presentation. Doug asks me, you said you retrain before testing. Who pays for this? Well, my school district runs things differently than most. We are paid by the completed student, not by the hour. So when a student drives with us, we're paid $95. The state reimburses $100 for behind the wheel training. So we can get paid, turn in a failed card, and then our district will turn in a failure to Audra Uri at the state, who will reimburse them for the failed drive. And then they turn in the next drive, whether it's a fail or a pass, to Audra, and the state will reimburse for up to 2 $100 behind the wheel training sessions. If your school district pays differently, as long as the test doesn't cost more than $100 and the retraining doesn't cost more than that, they should be able to follow the same procedure. It's possible that you may have to charge a student for a retrain. I had one parent, man, she wanted me to train her student all 40 hours. When I told her how much that would cost her, she changed her mind. But, you know, you can work it out with your district, with your coordinator, with your director at your district level to figure out how we can best help these students. Audra was talking earlier in the law and policy presentation about how much money they have to be able to pay schools for reimbursable expenses. If a special ed kid needs more time training behind the wheel, they get more time training behind the wheel and Audra can find out a way to pay for it. We just need to be an advocate for these kids, but we also need to be an unbiased tester. And if they really can't be out on the road, we should not let them. Okay, what do we need to keep on file? Daniel, can you explain that to me a little bit more? What do we need to keep on file? Oh, the routes. As part of covering yourself in a liability, you should keep a map that you have highlighted or drawn out on. This is our intended route. I have like 6 of them that go in different places. And I use those different routes to go with students, and I keep that on file in case somebody gets into a crash later and they say, well, you never took my kid on a lane that had 4 lanes, you know, 2 in one direction and 2 in another. I can say, oh yeah, I did right here. Because on that day on their feedback sheet, I say, what route did we take? And then I can mark where we were. Awesome. Did that answer everybody's question? Oh no, David has one more question. Sometimes a student is scary for 3 days, maybe has serious, scared for 3 days, maybe has serious right-of-way confusion, then drives clean during the test. This is more of a possible way to get, that is more possible to get away with a different examiner. Yeah, that is a good comment. I think anytime they're with a new adult in the car, their anxiety is heightened. So before I drive with a student, whether they're mine or they're somebody else's, whether it's training or behind the wheel testing, I try to get to know them a little bit. I let them know a couple of things like we're going to make sure we stop behind the line. We're going to make sure we check over our shoulder. This is what I need to see. This is where you need to be looking. Let's figure out how to turn on and off the windshield wipers. Let's figure out how to turn on and off the turn signal because maybe this car is a different car than they have driven before. And I try and help settle their nerves a little bit because anxieties can make it so that they perform more poorly on a test, but they also kind of help us to see what the kid really can do. And if they can't handle it, you know, it's better that they know now than when they get into a crash when they've had their license for 2 days. Yeah, like Audra says, the tester at the DLD doesn't know the student. And they're a little more intimidating because they're kind of formal and professional and they have a uniform and everything. So it is interesting. Yeah, you're now a tester, not an instructor. Okay, I'm going to go back to our presentation and we're going to hit some things in DEMS. Let's see if I can get chat to stay upright. There we go. Okay, so in DEMS, there's been some issues with people creating duplicate records because they don't think they can find the student. If the student has a permit, they are findable in DEMS. That's one thing to keep in mind. You have to have the student's permit number. The place where we really run into trouble with people adding duplicate records is when they're using that student's name and birth date. Just use their permit number. In DEMS, they call it the driver license or the DL number. It's the same thing. Unless you are entering a brand new student who is taking a permit test with you, you should not create a new record. If a student is going to take the permit test with you, you'll have to create a new record. And I've linked to DEMS, but I'm actually not going to go to it. We're just going to go here. Okay, so this is where you log in. You're going to be given a username and a password if you're a new instructor. If you're an existing instructor, then you already have one. If you don't have access to DEMS, you should not be driving students behind the wheel alone. If you're I call you a teacher candidate, a student teacher, a teacher who's becoming endorsed in driver education. If you have not completely finished, you should never be in the car with a student without your mentor with you. So that might mean there's 2 students and 2 adults in the car. Once you're logged in, you're going to be asked to sign in for your company or choose your company if you work for more than one school. If you only work for one school, it will skip that for it. I mean, it might flash for a minute and then it will go straight into the login screen. You do want to try and make sure you're in the right company because that links the student to your school. If you're entering data for a student, and let's say I'm logged in at Lone Peak, but I'm entering a student from Alpine's East Shore online, then when I enter them in, they'll be linked to Lone Peak. It's not a huge problem, but you'll have to make sure you click the link button if you ever run into something like that, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so to search for a student, you're going to start off on this screen and you're going to, you're going to enter their license number right here and then hit submit. Once you do that, you'll either get this screen telling you the student was found, and then it'll tell you whether or not the student was linked to your school. Make sure that that's the correct name and birth date and license number for that student. The student number will not match your student number from your school. It's a student number that DEMS creates for them. I've never been able to find that student number outside of being in DEMS, so I just make sure I always use the license number, but you can search by the student number if you have it. The vast majority of us will not have it. And then if a student is not found, you'll get a screen that looks like this. At this point, you are going to click add a new student, but I'm going to show you a trick that's really important. So once you click add a new student, make sure you're in the query screen. Sorry, I apologize for that. Make sure you're in the query screen and so click on the query screen first. And then you're going to be able to type in their driver license number and hit find by DL. That is our favorite button because it solves the problem of looking for a kid by their name and birth date and having it not show up. we asked why this was, and a driver license representative last time said because DEMS doesn't actually hold the data until we transfer it over. It's a way to protect student data from possible hacking or being lost or used by somebody who shouldn't use it. So once you hit find by DL number, it will tell you that a license has been found. If it gives you any other error, take a screenshot of it and send it to Sharon Harward at Driver License Division, and she can tell you, or at least help you figure out what the problem is. Sometimes it's just a glitch and you can search by the driver license number again and it'll come up. But if you search by their last name, first name, and their birth date, chances are you'll actually get more of an error. If it says license found, you want to update the student record, you're going to click on OK. And then it's going to take you to here. It's a screen we've been to before, but it will automatically for you populate the last name, the middle name, the first name, the birth date, any name on their suffix, anything that they gave, and it will fill in the active date. Once that's happened, your student is ready to be saved. Make sure you click on save, and then you can enter their training information. Now, this is what happens and what it looks like when a student's record gets entered twice. One of these records was for Andrew, was probably put in by his classroom instructor, and one was probably put in by his road instructor, which causes problems when Andrew tries to go to the driver license division because these two records are not merged. And DEMS is something only driver education teachers use. Driver license division does not use it. When they go to the driver license division and they tell them, okay, I'm here to get my license, here's my permit, they type in the permit number, and the same process that we did to get the information into DEMS happens to get the information out of DEMS. Now, Mr. Andrew could have had a name problem where the first instructor spelled his name wrong, but it's still linked to the driver license number, or any number of things. My guess, though, because of this being at my school, Andrew took his classroom from East Shore Online and he drove with a teacher at Lone Peak High School. So when driver license division gets this, they will not merge those two records. We need to do it. So when I see this happen, if I've got a second record in here, then I'll see, oh, this one's not linked. I'll click on that one and I'll click on the link tab. And now I will not put anything in this record anymore. I will put it in the one where the classroom has been entered. We can't delete records. We can't delete records. They can be deleted by, I think, Audra and Utah State Driver License Division. But once we've got a duplicate record in there, we're always possibly going to have problems. So make sure that you're getting the correct student, you're getting it linked to your school correctly. Okay, if you have a problem with a kid not being linked at your school, when you search for them by driver license number, it's going to come up with this link button down here. That wasn't on the screen before, but it is now. If you see that link button, just click it. Anytime you see it, if you're adding somebody to your own school, just click it. They can be unlinked from your school and linked back to another school, and then possibly need to be relinked back to your school. For example, a student who completes behind the wheel training and observation with me, but is still working on the classroom portion with their online teacher, I might put in behind the wheel training and observation when they finished, and then their classroom teacher from another school, say East Shore Online, will need to link their record to East Shore to be able to put in their classroom, and then their road testing teacher will need to link it back to Lone Peak from East Shore for them to be able to put in the road test. So if you see the link button, just make sure you click it. Okay, class observation and behind the wheel training is pretty simple to put in. Once you've clicked on training completion, you're going to click on the add button and you'll be given a screen that looks like this. Make sure you check the right training type. Occasionally, I have accidentally put classroom in twice when I intended classroom and observation, or when I intended observation and behind the wheel. You can put in multiples of these. You can put in that they've completed classroom twice and it won't cause a problem. You can put in that they've completed observation twice and it won't cause a problem. But we want to try not to do that because, again, we're just creating a official record and we've made a mistake. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Once you've got all of this information in, then you're going to hit the save button and you will see their record update. Right here where this black bar is the student's name, so you can make sure you're still working in the right student. Make sure all of these are correct. You can't delete them if they're incorrect, but you can add another one to correct it. And then to enter exams, wait, what am I showing you here? Oh, road test. Yeah, to enter a road test, you're going to leave training and go to exam. Once you've clicked on exams, it'll look just like it does when we're giving the training information, except there will be a little bit more stuff to put in. Notice that exam type, instructor score, and exam date are all required. They have the little red asterisk next to them. The other bits down here are not required, but you can enter them and it helps to create a better record. This same program is used by driver license driver education instructors who are commercial instructors, and they do have to put in that information. And then you're going to hit the add button and it'll pop this up. Yeah. And then make sure you hit the save button. And I have a random circle, sorry. Then you're going to end up wanting to give them a completion document. So once the training is done, once you put in exams, now you're going to go back to the student tab. When you click on the student tab, it takes you back here. We've all seen this before. And if you're giving them a written permit test, you're going to click on this button to give them the knowledge test document. If you're not giving them a permit test and they're just finished and ready to go to the driver license division, you're going to click on completion certificate. And at this point, you'll get a document downloaded to your computer that looks like this. This document shows everything they need to prove that they've completed all 4 parts of driver education: classroom, observation, behind the wheel, and road testing. It has a spot for your signature, but driver license division will not accept this in place of DEMS. Everything has to be in DEMS. So I don't actually print this out, sign it, and give it to the student anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. You can take a screenshot of it and email it. You can download it and email it to the student. If it's not convenient where you're at, they don't need this document, but it does help me show, okay, all of this stuff is in, so this kid really is ready to go to the driver license division. Now remember, the test score is only valid for 12 months from completion date. So since I have been aware of there's a problem in the state where some kids are not getting their license for longer than a year after they test, I've decided to make sure that when the student finishes and I tell their parent the student has completed, they've passed their road test, they're ready to go, that I tell them you only have a year from today to get your kid their license. Some parents say, well, we don't want to let them have their license until they've completed their Eagle Scout project or until they've done, whatever. I say, okay, that's great. I'm glad. Be that parent. Know that if they don't get their license within 12 months, they will have to go to the driver license division and pay to take another test. That has probably solved all of those problems for us. Communication's key, right? Communication's key. Even if you print this and give it to the kid, you might want to highlight that or circle it. And the certification of completion does not expire. So what that means is their classroom completion, observation completion, and behind the wheel completion doesn't expire. So they don't have to start back over. They just have to retest. Okay. To create a new record, does anybody have questions at this point? Let's pause right here and see if anybody has questions. I'm doing better on time than I was last time. Okay, no questions are coming up. So if you do have one, feel free to ask them and I will be happy to help. Okay, to enter a new record into the DEMS means you're giving a student a permit test. Only create a new record if you are in fact giving the student a permit test. Only create a record if that student does not have a permit, and only if they pass the permit test. If you give them a permit test and they fail, do not enter that into the record. Don't create a new record. Just tell them to come back and retest after they've studied. Okay, so you start off in DEMS, you're in the home screen, you're gonna go to the query tab, and you're gonna try typing in their last name, first name, and date of birth, and hit submit. You won't have a driver license to enter, so don't enter anything there. Once you hit submit, it's gonna tell you that no student could be found, and you're gonna click on add a new student. Once you're here, the information you put in for last name, first name, middle name, and date of birth will come over. So make sure those are spelled 100% correctly. For our students who have multiple surnames, make sure that you have it put in however it shows up on their legal documents. So they might have two surnames. They might have made it, they might have two surnames here in the last name category. They might have two first names. It depends on how that's set up for them as a student. And then you're going to hit the save button. And it's going to ask you to go, well, you're going to click on exams and you're going to click add. Audra asks, oh, Shannon Hurst, is it normal for their written exams not to be there when I enter the other items? Yes, Shannon, if they did not take the written exam from your school, there won't be a written exam in DEMS because Driver License Division doesn't use DEMS. Only if they took the permit test from you should it show up in DEMS. And Audra's asking, what if there's a hyphen in their name? If there's a hyphen in their name, those two names go together in the last name box. So if they're like D-Sundwall, then the last name would be D-Sundwall. If there's not a hyphen, that's where we get a little bit of trouble about knowing what name goes where. I just say, ask them what their birth certificate says, because that's split into first name and last name. Shannon, if they take it from you, that written test score should be in there. But as long as they have a permit number that comes up when you hit find by DL number, then it doesn't matter if it's there or not. If the kid has a permit in their hand, we're good. Yeah. Okay. Make sure when you enter the exam type for a written exam that you are selecting the correct type of exam. Because when we hit that drop down, it'll say regular operator road and regular operator written. Court Clove, what about entering the classroom and they don't have a permit number yet? Ooh, court, according to Utah state policy, the law and policy handbook that Audra talked about earlier, they are supposed to have a permit before they start taking the course, which makes it kind of problematic if they don't. As long as they don't have a permit yet, you can't enter the classroom. You have to wait until they have a permit. Okay, I feel like I missed something. Okay, once you've entered exam type, selected your name, given their score and their date, you're going to hit save.
Allison, hold on one second.
Yeah.
Okay, what you just said is actually not correct.
Oh.
They can start the classroom portion without a permit. They can't start driving without a permit.
Well, that's a change then. Okay.
So, and that's comes from driver's licensing. Your school at Alpine might be different than someone else. So like Salt Lake School District or Granite, they allow them to start the classroom without a permit. Okay, so that's a school policy, not the actual statute. They can do everything besides drive without the permit. You can get a when you put in their name and date of birth in DEMS, it will actually create a number for them that's not a permit number, and it'll create a number for them. And that's why it's so important to link or try to make sure that the students go together, because some students will start without a permit.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a change. One of the things I would do then, if you're putting in classroom and they don't have a permit, you're probably going to do that either through groups or you're going to do that maybe through individuals. I would somehow find a way to keep track of their student number that DEMS will create, because that's going to be the only way for you as the instructor to find them again for sure. There might be some classroom entries out that are just hanging out that are not attached to a student and their permit. Audra, that's not always true if somebody enters it incorrectly into DEMS. We want to make sure that everything is spelled correctly and spelled the same, and that last names and hyphenated names, we've had trouble just today finding students because somebody put in the birth date wrong. They put it in as such and such date 2021, but none of us knew that that was where they found it. So the student number is a guaranteed way that you can find them if they don't have a permit number. I've had so many problems with an error coming up lately when I type in last name, first name, and date of birth. It's been really hard. Okay, so enter all that data in, hit save, and then it will take you back here. You're going to click on the knowledge test document, and you're going to get another document that looks similar to the completion certificate. I don't happen to have a copy to show it to you. You have to print this out and send it to the student with the DLD. That's absolutely essential, because if I entered the name wrong, if I entered the birth date wrong, if anything gets screwed up, if the kid writes it sloppy on their application form, then they can't find it. For example, I have a student right now who's going through a name change process. His middle name is Noah, N-O-A-H, but for some reason on his birth certificate legal documents, it's N-A-O-H. And so when I started typing in Noah, he's like, oh no, you have to misspell it because they won't be able to find it. And it's problematic. Wendy, I hear you on some of the names that are so long. I don't know what to do on that.
David also has a question. Can you please show how to enter a test again?
Yeah, I'll go back.
And then there was a question on how to put in Hispanic names when they have several names.
Yeah, that one's tricky. I would ask if you're putting in a Hispanic name, like they have 3 last names, 2 last names, whatever, ask them to bring the copy of their birth certificate or have them take a picture of it and bring it to you when you enter things into DEMS, because then you'll get their legal name. And that's one of the things we need to make sure we have, is that the first and the last name is legal. Okay, so you're going to search for the student to enter a new written record. Well, let me go back here. Click on add a new student. Make sure you put in their last, first, and date of birth. Sorry, last, first, and date of birth. Middle name is not required, but you can add it. And then hit save. Once you've done that, it'll take you back to the student's home screen, but you can click on exams tab. And then you can enter the information here: exam type, regular, operator, written, your instructor name, enter their score. Now remember, the scores are out of 100% and they have to pass with an 80 or higher. If they don't get an 80%, they're not passing, and you should not enter that into DEMS. And then we need to enter the exam date. If you click in that box, it'll bring up a calendar that you can check from, and then make sure you hit the save button. Did that answer David Wadsworth's question? Okay, perfect. Wendy, yeah, sometimes middle names are used as their second last name. And sometimes the kids will choose to go by the first or the second of the last names in their like everyday existence. But legally, one of them is assigned as their last name, or it's a hyphenated last name or something. So it just helps if we look at the legal document. If they have 2 middle names, you shouldn't have a problem with that. You should be able to just go right here. You should just be able to type a name, give a space, and type another name. That should be fine. You should be able to do that on all of these. Type it in, leave a space, and type in again. I've never run out of space, but if you're typing 2 really long names, you might have trouble. Okay, so we've created the record. Now we're going to get that knowledge test. You have to print this one, sign it, and give it to the kid, because that gives the driver license division their student number in DEMS. And that lets them link DEMS permit test to the driver license division database. And if you don't do that, DLD sometimes has a really hard time finding the student. And then the student has to retake the permit test at the driver license division and pay for it, which sucks, but you know, it's not the end of the world. At least they'll still get their permit. Okay, and that's it. If you've got questions, direct them to USBE if it's about training and testing. If it's about DEMS, you want to contact Sharon Harward. There's another gentleman, I can't remember his name. Colton?
Coulter-Balds. I'll
Yeah.
put it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If you've got any other questions for me, feel free to let me know and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you, Audra. I am going to send to Audra a lucid chart that shows you, okay, you're going to look here and it has a screenshot and it has an arrow. This is what you do next. And it has an arrow and tells you what to do. I'm also going to send to her some trainings that you might give to parents that they can practice driving with their student in a directed way. That will help you in your examinations. And I have a sample feedback card that you can use as well. Kevin, I'm glad I could help and answer questions. Chad, thanks for coming. If nobody has any other questions, I'm going to give it back to Audra. What kind of helps can kids get at the DLD? The test isn't timed, so an extended time is not an issue. I don't know what they can get.
The important thing is for the student to make the driver's licensing office aware they need the accommodations.
Okay.
And they will do a progression through them. They take out extraneous questions. They do not change the language. It's only in English. They have an extended time. It just depends on what accommodation the student needs. They have a little chart that tells them.
Yeah. One of the things we're not allowed to do is change the language, like Audra said. Another thing we're not allowed to give is, or that even the driver license won't do necessarily, is to read every test question to the kid. There are some things they have to be able to do. Yeah, Tara says they'll read them. There is an audio, but like we can't change it into another language and help them that way. Tara can actually answer that question better than I can because she's from driver license division. Doug, I'm going to add my feedback template to the list of things I'm sending to Audra, and she'll give it out with all of the other paraphernalia that presenters are giving. So if you don't get it or you want it right now, you can email me and I'll send it to you later tonight.
Some of the participants raise their hands, but they don't have the ability to speak. So if they would put their questions in chat, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, I don't even see the hands raised. Sorry. Okay, well, I am double scheduled at the moment. I'm supposed to be at a training with my district. So I'm going to turn this over to Audra to handle any other questions. And then I'll see you guys again on Friday for mentor stuff. That'll be exciting. Thanks, Audra.
Thank you, Allison. Our next session starts at 4 o'clock and it is going to talk to you about using simulators in your classrooms. As we talk about simulators, we do not have any state contracts currently, or I don't know if any districts have contracts with simulator companies, but simulators are something that you can get reimbursed for if you choose to use them in your classroom. So your school district can just choose any company that they want to at this point in time. Just on top of that, we do have 2 companies that are approved for scheduling software. I'll be sending that information out to everyone. We made contracts to replace Moneo Drive. There's 2 scheduling software companies now that you can choose from to use to schedule your students, and those are also reimbursed if you choose to use those companies. And they charge by the student that uses it. It's very similar to Street Smarts. Matt, you have the question about Do we have a video showing how to do the driving test and how it's scored? Yes, that is called the examiner training course. And we are making a new one right now, and it will be done in actually a few days, and it will be sent out to everyone to retake that course. And that course is specifically to show you each of the maneuvers and what's on that standardized test and how to score it. So you will all have it soon, a new one.